Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We will do a soft start just to kind of get this kicked off. We, of course, as always, have a relatively packed schedule, but want to make sure that we have time for everyone to spend some time giving us feedback um, around data management plans. So thanks, everyone, for joining. This is the ESIP session with probably not the longest title, but a close running for the longest title, exploring how updates and training could make data management plans more impactful. We went for just DMPs because it's short. There's a lot of different words and acronyms for these now, but they're open science data management plans. And we're going to hear about a sort of collection of them. Um, the link to the notes is in the Zoom chat. It's also in the Kiko and in Sketch. So please make sure to sign in so we kind of have an idea of who's here. We'll explain why that's relevant and important at the end. I would like to have my co-host do some introductions first so you kind of know who's everyone in the room, and then we have 4 speakers with us that will do presentations. After the presentations, we'll go straight into the breakout rooms. I will sort of set those up. We've kind of assigned either one of the co-hosts or one of the presenters to kind of be an expert in the room while we're doing sort of the breakout session. Then we'll come back, do a quick little report out. Then we have an update on some of the NSF proposal guidelines. So we'll hear kind of what's going on there and how you can provide some feedback. Then we'll do a wrap up and figure out what the next steps are. We are planning to have a follow-on session for this summer for the in-person meeting in Seattle. So this will not be a one-off thing. So I'll start. My name is Alicia Wood-Charlson. I'm at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and I work on a data analysis platform called KBase. And I'm currently the chair of the Data Stewardship Committee. And data management plans, we as a collective have the data management plan conversation has been coming up in ESIP quite often. And good data stewardship starts at the beginning. So we decided to partner with the Marine Data Cluster, who's been having conversations around DMPs to help support some of their efforts there. And I will pass it off to one of my co-hosts, Carolina, to introduce herself as well.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, I'm Carolina. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Marine Data Cluster, and I work I'm a data manager at CCHDO at Scripps Institution of Oceanography in San Diego. And yeah, this is a great to collaborate with the Data Stewardship Committee on this. And I'll hand it over to Joseph, who actually kicked this off.
Hi, I'm Joseph Gum, Data Stewardship Coordinator at NSF NCAR. I, like Carolina said, kind of kicked this off by hosting a session last year at Asheville about getting DMPs into DMP tool, which we didn't actually get any DMPs into DMP tool, but that's okay. Small steps forward. And we started this collaboration with Alicia and others that were in the room, and I'm hoping to keep this going. And I'll turn this over to Rachel if she's here.
Rachel is our other co-coordinator for this, and I believe she was not able to make today because she had a conflict. So Rachel Blake, you can find her in the Slack group, but she's been part of the Data Stewardship Committee and helped with the Asheville DMP session as well. So she's around, and hopefully she'll be in the in-person one coming up this summer. Okay, so the goal for today is to have a couple of representatives talk through their approach to data management plans. The charge that the co-organizers gave them was, what are they? How are you using them? What has been working? What has not been working? And kind of what are your plans in the future? So we have a representative, Steve from NASA, who will kick us off, Madison from USGS, and then we'll pass it over to Angie, who's here at the Arctic Data Center. And also is represented by Matt Jones and Nicole Greco as well. Then we have a speaker who has a little bit more time allocated for her presentation, partly because the data management plan tool, so the DMP tool run by the California Digital Library, is kind of the platform where a lot of these resources are going. And so Becky Grady is here to talk about the DMP tool and kind of their roadmap, especially moving DMPs into machine actionable data management plans, which everybody's very excited about, but what does that mean? And how do we make sure that we are prepared to utilize that new technology with our data management plans moving forward? The goal for those 4 presentations is to give you, depending upon where you are with your familiarity with data management plans or DMP tool, to give you enough primer to kind of understand what's working, what's not working, what is out there in terms of training and resources, what does support look like, what is working in terms of very broad data management plans versus data management plans that maybe have very specific tailored data types, and how do we actually get the useful, actionable information from people that are filling them out that maybe that aren't part of this community, right? So how can we actually provide a data management plan structure with guidance and training and examples to someone who's never seen a data management plan or hasn't really had experience with it, and they're able to go in and put in effective, useful information for sort of the long-term planning of their project. So when you get to the breakout rooms, please keep that in mind, right? Like what is working, what are some of the best practices across these various different things for a variety of topics that are seem to be fairly consistent across the variety of data management plans I looked at. But then also like what's not working, right? Like what is still kind of a limitation or something that you feel like would represent your research or your data that's not being reflected in there, so that we can give some feedback around kind of areas that we need to dig a little deeper. So that's kind of the plan. So keep that in mind as you're hearing the speakers go through their various presentations, is what is good and working and kind of best practice across these different examples, and then what are maybe some limitations that don't necessarily reflect how you do your research that we still need to consider as a community, so that you have a good primer for filling these out when you're submitting a proposal. Joseph, Carolina, did I miss anything? Does that sound about right?
Sounds good.
Great.
Good.
And I forgot to have one person introduce himself. We have another facilitator that's also the ESIP fellow for the Data Stewardship Committee. Sorry, Bolivar, please introduce yourself. This is another face that will be helping facilitate some of this.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here. Bolivar Aponte, I'm a new community fellow, very new to the DMP kind of conversations, but have always been very interested in kind of data management and the life cycle of data. So that's why I'm here, and I will hope to just in the breakout room kind of help steer the conversation a little bit and prompt folks. But I also, I'm new to DMP, so I will rely on people's knowledge and kind of just have them think about the process a little bit more. So thank you, and I'm excited to be here.
Thanks, Bolivar. Is there anything that I forgot to mention? But he was been very helpful in designing this session, for having somebody that's joining the data stewardship that's very interested in the topic, but maybe not as deep in the weeds. So Bolivar's insights were actually quite useful in helping design the session. So was there anything else I missed, Bolivar, that we had talked about that I should remind people?
No, yeah, I think not being into the weeds has helped kind of make us think a little bit more. So yeah, that's all.
Great. Okay, so with that, I will pass it over to Steve. I'm going to share my screen for his slides, but Steve, do you want to introduce yourself and kick us off?
Sure, will do. Thanks very much. I'm Steve Crawford. I'm part of the Office of the Chief Science Data Officer in the Science Mission Directorate at NASA. We're the group that's responsible for the overall science data policies for SMD. And yeah, looking forward to sharing our update on open science and data management plans. And so if you go to the next slide. So just to mention that NASA in December released our update to our public access plan. It is called NASA's Public Access Plan, Increasing Access to the Results of Scientific Research. And this actually highlights the different things and aspects of information that we're hoping that scientists will share as part of their proposals and as part of their grant-funded work. If you go to the next slide, you have then the outline of the different things that SMD expects for when people are actually producing their work and how they share their research. These are broken up both into what we expect for research projects, so things which are typically funded through our ROSEs, our Research Opportunities for Space and Earth Science calls. And then also what we expect for our missions. These are for, flagship missions which are are many different ones, over 140, which are either operation or in design right now, and development. And we do have a higher expectation for those. But for our researchers, it's mainly the main aspects of sharing is tied around publications and making sure that your publications are reproducible. And so our different expectations around data are that the data should be fair and shall be made publicly available with a clear, open, and accessible data license no later than the publication of the research and be citable. For our mission data, we believe it should be openly available with no period of exclusive access. We also do require as well that research software developed as part of the proposal or the grant fund research will be made publicly available at the time of the publication of the research. This is one of the things where so much of our science is dependent upon the software that is also being used to make it, that we want to make sure that the software being developed is released at the same time to make sure that research is really publicly, is really reproducible. Mission software for our missions for the scientific software will be developed openly in a publicly accessible version control platform. And then our publications are expected to be published as accepted manuscripts deposited with a NASA repository and made publicly available without any embargo. We do support publishing as open access and also encourage the use of publishing as preprints. And we do also hope that our science workshops and meetings are open to broad participation and documented in public repositories. And these open science activities will be considered as part of the reviews of proposals. When we're reviewing proposals, they're included in the merit consideration. And we do require proposals to have an open science and data management plan. And if you go to the next slide, I'll go into some more detail about our open science, how it's infused into our grants and missions. For grants, our open science and data management plans are required for all proposals beginning in ROSES 23. And it requires that data and software are shared at the time of publication or at the end of the grant, that the publications are made publicly accessible. And for ROSES 25, we will actually have a new SMD-wide OSDMP template. We haven't released that yet. ROSES 25 will be released in mid-February, and we'll release it before then. But we will be replacing our existing templates with one which will be applicable to all of the SMD solicitations. For missions, we have open science is infused throughout the mission lifecycle. Project requirements have been updated to include open science requirements, including an OSDMP as a living document throughout the mission to provide an open science roadmap for the project. This includes openly available data and developing scientific software openly to provide greater transparency and reuse. And some of the examples of open science activities throughout the mission's lifecycle, including provide an overview of the open science components, providing open engagements and meetings throughout the planning phase of the mission, baseline of open science requirements in the phase C of the mission, and then further open development of the scientific software prior to launch of the mission, and then having open data and publications that describe the mission during operations of the mission. And so if we go to the next slide, one of the things that we're really focused on with the development for ROSES is in actually making sure that there is availability information about our open science and data management plan and making that easier for our researchers. Once again, ROSES is our primary grant mechanism for scientific funding. It's our research opportunities in space and earth science. Most ROSES elements do require an open science and data management plan. There's a few associated with, for example, educational activities that may not require it, but for the most part, all of our solicitations require an OSDMP. As mentioned, we'll be releasing a standard template for OSDMPs for ROSES 25 that can be used for all divisions. Just to kind of mention, we have been in discussion with DMP tool to make sure that once we have that ready, that we make it available there as well. And OSDMPs basically include how the publications will be made publicly accessible, what data will be used and produced and made accessible, and what software will be produced and made accessible. To describe that throughout your OSDMP, to actually basically put together a plan of how you're going to be making that accessible. Different solicitations do give more guidance about specific places where data or software should be made accessible. But we also do have general guidance as well if there isn't already a specific data repository where your data or your software should live. And I think on the next slide, I have some examples of these additional resources. And so we're really focused within the OCSDO is making open science and data management as easy as possible for our researchers. And so we do actually provide a range of different policies and different additional guidance. These include our page on scientific information policy page, our frequently asked questions on SBD 41A, which is our policy, our science information policy. We also have an email address available for if you do have any questions, which is hq-smd-sbd41@mail.nasa.gov. We're always checking that and always, ready there to answer you if you do have any questions. We've also provided an open source science guidance for researchers. This is a narrative document kind of stepping you through what are the different ways to make your data accessible or software or other open science activities. We have division-specific guidance and resources. So each of our divisions, like the Earth Science Division, does have more specific guidance, which is relevant to their community. And then we also have guidance for reviewers of OSDMPs as well. And so when you're actually participating in a panel about how to review and take a look at an open science and data management plan, which is also a good thing to take a look at if you're writing OSDMPs to know how people will be looking at that. We'll be updating shortly our Roses OSDMP page to actually provide links to all of this information. And so once that is refreshed, and it should be before February 14th, that you'll be able to find links to all this information along with the new SMD template for OSDMPs available there. In addition to the additional guidance, we've also been looking at different ways to actually make it easier to make some of this information more accessible. And that's it, for example, in supporting open science tools, making, for example, the different tools to actually help discovery with scientific information, like the Science Discovery Engine and the Science Explorer, which both provide search for data and for publications across Earth and space science. And we also have funding opportunities like the Supplement for Open Source Science and the High Priority Open Source Science calls within Roses to help open science and help people make their data and software more accessible as well. One final thing I'll mention is just on the next slide, we also have the Transform to Open Science program. And with that, we released the Open Science 101 curriculum, where we did make available basically a curriculum that would step you through how to write an open science and data management plan. Over 2,000 people have already completed it. And so if you do actually want more details about the different information and how to actually make your information more accessible, I'd highly encourage taking the course as there's lots of good resources there as well. All right, thank you very much.
Excellent. One thing I forgot to mention, just in the essence of time, is we're going to try to get through these presentations relatively quickly. Please put any questions you have for Steve in the notes document under his presentation section. And Stephen, please keep an eye on that and be sure to answer any questions there as they come in. We should have a little bit of time at the end of all the talks if there are any questions sort of in general that bubble up, but any sort of agency-specific ones can be put in the notes doc for now. And with that, I'll hand it over to Madison to introduce herself, and I believe she will share her screen.
Yes, let's see. Right. Hide that. Okay,
Looks
great.
good.
So yes, I'm Madison Langseth, and I'm with the U.S. Geological Survey. I'm in the Science Data Management branch. And basically, my role there, I lead communities of practice related to data management and develop tools to help our researchers with their data management needs. So today, I'll be sharing some of the work that we've been doing at the USGS to assess and ultimately improve the value and usage of data management plans, or DMPs. So back in 2016, USGS released a series of data management related policies. And since then, the USGS Science Data Management team has been working to help the Bureau meet these new requirements. A significant portion of these policies relate to tasks that happen at the end of a project, like creating metadata, getting data reviewed and approved, and releasing the data. After almost a decade, the Bureau has really started to get the hang of publishing data, which is great. However, we do still encounter challenges at the point of releasing data that may be reduced or eliminated through better planning at the start of the project. So USGS policy stipulates that every project should have a data management plan, but having a policy kind of requiring DMPs is one thing. However, implementing DMPs as a useful planning tool is another story. One thing that I will note that's maybe a little different from some like what NASA is doing is USGS, our research is primarily intramural. So we do put out a few kind of calls for proposals and grants. However, the majority of our research is kind of happening through appropriated or reimbursable funding with like USGS researchers. USGS is also highly distributed. So we have lots of many science centers that kind of each operate independently. And some of these science centers within USGS have fully embraced the data management plan and kind of have processes in place for completing them, while others are still trying to figure out kind of how to make them work within their center. So our team wanted to collect some baseline data about current data management planning practices, perceptions, and needs from individuals across the Bureau, across a variety of roles. So these baseline data enable us to understand where we are in USGS with respect to data management planning, to help us better define the purpose or purposes of our DMPs, and hopefully increase the value and use, as well as the ease of use of data management plans to serve this purpose. So to collect these baseline data, we developed 4 separate surveys, one each for researchers, data managers, and IT professionals, center directors, and one for program coordinators and our Bureau approving officials. And each asked very similar questions with slight variations in the phrasing kind of tailored to each audience. And we had additional questions for researchers and data managers who have kind of more direct experience and detailed knowledge of data management planning processes at their center compared to kind of higher level folks like center directors and program coordinators. And after the survey closed, we interviewed 10 data managers and 10 researchers, kind of randomly selected from those who indicated their willingness to be interviewed, to dig a little deeper into some of the themes that we saw emerging from the surveys. And here's just a few of our key findings from the project. So first, researchers are motivated to create DMPs because of USGS or center policies, but they find kind of the purpose of DMPs to be unclear. So they're not really sure, why am I doing this? How does this benefit me, kind of thing. USGS projects do have DMPs. When I started this out, I was like, I don't know if there are any DMPs actually happening in USGS, but they do exist. About 50% of kind of the people responding said that they had a DMP for their project. And if a center had somebody to help with DMP creation, DMPs were more likely to exist and be perceived as useful. Researchers and data managers kind of across the board desired kind of better DMP training. But there was this tension between flexible DMP templates, which were desired by researchers, and standardized DMP templates, which were desired by data managers. And then finally, most centers did not actually have established processes for reviewing and updating DMPs. If you are interested in the full project report, it is available at the DOI shown here on the slide. And I'll drop that into the chat after my presentation. Okay, so based on the surveys and the interviews, we developed a total of 16 recommendations, and the USGS Community for Data Integrations Data Management Working Group helped us to prioritize the list. So what I'm showing here on the slide is a list of the top 5 recommendations, kind of in order of priority. So, and many of these we've started working on. So first, work with center directors to help them understand the benefits of assigning a full-time data manager for every science center. So we have been within USGS, we have what's called the Data Advisory Board, and we've been working with that group to survey all USGS Science Center directors to determine what centers have data managers, what their roles are, how many FTEs work on the data management team, and understanding the current state kind of data managers is our first step to address this recommendation. Second, was to update USGS DMP guidance to narrow and explicitly state the intended purpose of DMPs, which was to ensure USGS researchers plan to meet USGS and federal policies related to data and information management. And we've updated our USGS public access plan and our data management survey manual chapters to explicitly state this purpose. Third, empower data managers and information technologists to get involved in the beginning or planning stages of research projects and in DMP development. So to kind of meet this recommendation, we have established the USGS Data Manager Forum, which is a community of practice of delegated data managers from each science center. And we've had a number of discussions within that space around data management planning to help improve processes at science centers. Fourth, develop training material on data and information management policies and DMP creation. We haven't yet started on this recommendation, but we are hoping that this work will happen through the USGS Data Manager Forum. And then finally, define criteria and develop checklists for assessing and approving DMPs. The rationale behind this recommendation was that depending on the funder or the partner organizations, different projects had different requirements for DMP templates that they needed to use, and data managers were struggling to figure out how to review these different DMPs. So we pulled together a tiger team of data and records managers to develop this resource. And we released the first version of the DMP review checklist on the data management website for USGS at the end of 2023. It was designed to help center directors or designated DMP approvers flag any potential oversights or data management challenges related to policy requirements before they became an issue. So the goal was for the checklist to have minimal and generic criteria so that it would be applicable across the USGS. And it is intended to be applied at the beginning of a project, preferably before the project is started. If a DMP creator does not have a DMP template, they may also be able to use this checklist to ensure that they're addressing the most important criteria in the DMP. This is my last slide. So the DMP review checklist has 6 sections: data sharing responsibilities, open standards and formats, costs and resources, backup and secure, public access and preservation, and related policies covering topics such as animal welfare, human subjects research, and paperwork reduction, to name a few. All right, so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have. Thank you very much for listening.
Perfect. Thanks, Madison. Again, please use the notes doc if you have any specific questions for USGS within Madison's presentation. And we will move on next to the Arctic Data Center, which we have several representatives for, and I think Angie will be sharing her screen and doing the presentation.
Hi, yes, thank you, Alicia. And thank you for inviting us for the DMP session. I'm Angie Garcia, Community Engagement and Outreach Coordinator for both the Arctic Data Center and Data One. And I'm accompanied today on this call with Nicole Greco and Matt Jones for this presentation. So let's just get started. So little background on the Arctic Data Center. The Arctic Data Center is the primary and software repository for the Arctic section of the National Science Foundation's Office of Polar Programs. So we're best known in the research community as a data archive. researchers upload their data to preserve it for the future and make it available for reuse. And alongside that, we offer a variety of different tools and services from our infrastructure for the Arctic research community, like our training and outreach, data discovery portals, data archive, data rescue. There's a variety of different support services that we offer. And in one of our support materials, we have created an Arctic Data Center template within the DMP tool that fulfills the NSF template requirements and provides guidance on how to work with the Arctic Data Center for preservation. Just so for a little background on the DMPs, so why plan for a data management plan? So we've noticed that many funding agencies require that researchers write data management plans as part of the proposal. So in planning ahead of time, it saves you time and increases efficiency. It engages your team and collaborators in the project planning. It encourages organization early on in the planning process and thinking about how your data will be shared and used. It'll also meet funder requirements alongside with your data, sharing your data. So how to plan. On the Arctic Data Center website, we do have a walkthrough of different resources that are available in helping researchers create these plans and think about how to plan these things. And these are also resources that we go through in our training and outreach programs. So how to plan. Some tips in thinking about how to prepare your DMP include devising your plan with collaborators, starting your plan early in the research process, and utilizing resources and tools that can help you develop your plan, and make sure that you're including all the required components, and revising your plan as your project progresses and evolves. So the NSF has a list of requirements for DMPs, and I'll go over a few of them, just not in detail. So these are a few things that to keep in mind. So the products of research, so the types of data and samples and the physical collections that will be, and other materials that will be produced during your project. The data formats and standards, so how the data will be used and the metadata format that'll be used. Policies for accessing and sharing that data. So provisions for appropriate protection of privacy, sensitivity, and other rights or requirements that need to be considered. Policies and provisions for reuse, so including redistribution and the production of derivatives. Archiving data, so any plans for data, samples, research products, and other preservations of access. And when formulating your DMP at the Arctic Data Center, we really want researchers to consider how you will conduct research ethically and support Indigenous data sovereignty if it's applicable. And we have a little bit of more information specific to NSF Polar programs here, and we can also include that resource at the end of this presentation. So I believe Becky might go a little bit more in detail about the DMP tool and what it looks like when you're creating a new plan. But on the DMP tool website, there are currently 4 Arctic Data Center templates that have been used and publicly published. So here are just those 4 that are there. And when you're on the DMP tool website, you can see other templates that have been used as well. So this slide kind of shows you a screenshot of what it looks like when you're utilizing our DMP tool template, and it walks researchers through a variety of different questions required by NSF and includes specific recommendations directly from the Arctic Data Center team. So in summary, when writing good DMPs, it saves you time in the long run and should be revised as your research project evolves. And we at the Arctic Data Center really encourage researchers who are mandated by NSF to take advantage of the DMP resources that we have on our website and both on the DMP tool website, and reach out to our team for any help in developing your DMP, especially if you're using our template. And our creation team at the Arctic Data Center consists of 2 full-time coordinators and our student interns who serve as resources essentially for researchers and are happy to help at any stage in the DMP process. And with that, for any questions or any support, you can go ahead and email us, and maybe if there are more questions, we can go ahead and discuss those during the breakout rooms.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Angie. And again, please leverage the notes document if there's any specific questions for our Arctic Data Center. And the otter picture is very cute. Okay, so I will hand it over to Becky next from the California Digital Library to talk about the DMP tool and sort of the plans moving forward. When she's done, we will have some time, hopefully, for questions in general. So feel free to have any general questions, and then we'll go into the breakout rooms after her presentation. So Becky, over to you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about templates, guidance, and the DMP tool, and some of our plans for machine actual plans in the future. And I'm also here with my colleague, Steve Diggs, who said he's happy to answer questions as well. We're both from the California Digital Library, part of the University of California Office of the President, and we work at the University of California Curation Center concerned with maintaining, preserving, and adding value to digital research data. And my particular area that I work on is the DMP tool. Many of you may have heard of that before, but it's a tool to help people write the data management plans that we've been talking about in this session. So I think we all know what a DMP is. Just as mentioned earlier, it's often also called a data management and sharing plan, and it documents how you're going to manage your data throughout the life cycle of the project. One thing we have been talking about already, but just to make sure we're all on the same page about, is what is a DMP template, because that's a term I'm going to use a lot in this presentation. And the template is the series of questions that are put out by each funder, as we just heard from a few, that when answered make up the plan. And it's usually about 2 pages. And funders want to make sure that researchers are going to follow their specific policies, which is why each of them often have their own template. They want to make sure all that necessary information is covered. Researchers need to go and figure out which template they need to fill out for the funder they're applying for. If they're going to NASA, they're going to find the right one for NASA and fill out that particular template to submit with their grant proposal. And this can be a very challenging process for people to figure out, especially when this was a new phenomenon. And so that's how the DMP tool got started. It's a free open source walkthrough wizard that helps people write their plans by helping them find the right funder to what's the template they should be using for their grant, and give them guidance from the DMP tool, from the funder, and their own research organization to write that plan. It also allows them to register for a DMP ID to get a persistent identifier and have that landing page to make that data management public and updatable over time. So I'm not going to show too much of the current tool for the sake of time, but just to kind of walk through, how this works. When somebody goes to start a new plan, they're going to put in the title, they're going to select their research organization. This is primarily used to find the right guidance for them if their organization has added any in the tool. They're going to select the funder, and then based on the funder selected, they're going to get options for templates. So in this example, in this screenshot, the person has selected NSF, and so you see all of the different NSF templates that we have available in the tool. They have to be in the tool for it to show up. If there are no templates for that funder that's selected, then it will show if there are any templates the research organization has put out. If neither of those have any templates available, it will show a single default demo template. Currently in the tool, there is no way to select a template other than for the funder that you've selected, but we hope to change that in the future, which I will be talking about later. So one thing that came up earlier as well is, how do templates get into the tool, which is a question we get asked a lot. And so the funders are the ones that are creating the templates themselves or updating them over time, sometimes consolidating to one template, sometimes creating new ones for a new division. And then somehow or another, the DMP tool needs to be aware that there's a new template to be added. We have an editorial board that helps us keep track of templates and work with funders to find them out. Could be that I saw one in the news or showed up to a conference like this and heard that there's one coming, or it could be that the funders reach out to us directly to tell us that there is one coming. And then somebody's got to actually enter it in. So again, sometimes that's me or somebody from my team, sometimes it's from our editorial board, and there are some funders that manage their own templates themselves if they're made admins in the tool. Once somebody's an admin, then they can go program the template in, putting in the question text, what type of question is, and building that template in the tool. And then once it's published, people can select it from that start page that I showed earlier. So I also want to briefly show for people who haven't been administrators in the tool, the option called guidance. So we also have guidance that organizational admins can add. So I'm from the UC Office of the President. A UC Office of the President admin could add their own guidance in the tool that shows on top of all templates if I, am writing a plan. So for example, in this screenshot here, you can see somebody can add some guidance. Here's just a sample one about like, an organization one will often be something like, oh, hey, we have our own organizational repository you should use, by the way. And they can attach that guidance to themes that you can see in that screenshot. And that will show on all templates that are tagged with those themes. And that's a way for guidance to show up on all templates without having to add it to every specific one. And organizations can choose to make that public to all users or just for their own. When a user is writing a plan, they have an option to select up to 6 organizations to show guidance from. The vast majority of people are just going to go with the default, which is going to be the DMP tool best practice and their own resource organization, but they can select from others. Maybe they know another university that has really good guidance and their university hasn't put anything in the tool, or maybe there are professional organizations that have put out guidance for people in their field that they've told people to go select. And on the right side, you can see as people are writing this, they see the guidance on the right in tabs that people can tap before and see all the guidance that they have selected while they're writing. Getting the guidance into the tool is just from the organizational admins. People that want to be an admin of any organization will email that DMP tool. I'll ask them to fill out a form. I will grant them admin permission, and then they can publish their own guidance on their own. So it's a much more self-service process. All right, so that was a quick overview. So a couple relevant aspects of the DMP tool. Now let's talk about what are some of the exciting things coming next. The major thing we're working on is a complete rebuild of the application to offer machine actionable functionality and improve the user experience. So I'm going to just be able to touch on a couple points here for the sake of time. There's a link there that we can post in the notes to read a lot more about what's coming in the rebuild. But there's a lot of areas of the site that are difficult to use, non-intuitive, not the greatest user experience, and it's very hard for us to make changes due to some of the technology choices, the outdated technology. So it was time to completely rebuild from scratch that we're hoping will be easier to maintain and update over time. And we want to, put in this new data model that's going to help us offer a lot of cool machine actionable features. So what is a machine actionable DMP? You'll also hear is MADMSP. It's a structured machine readable version of a traditional narrative-based ERD. The idea is rather than everything just being on a Word document or a piece of text, the more we can get things into structured formats, like fields that have specific, drop-down selects or persistent identifiers like ORCIDs, it can allow a lot of automation and integration with other workflows, electronic lab notebooks, funder APIs, and there's a lot of cool integration opportunities. We're working on a pilot project right now that's just wrapping up. That image there, Matt Pilot, is also linked to the project website. Where universities are piloting, what are all the different things you could do with this type of machine actionable plan? People are looking at automated notifications, integrating with university systems, or putting it into AIs to help people review DMPs. So a lot of cool things that could happen if the data from a DMP was more structured. Our goal is to make the entire DMP machine actionable. We already do have an API that people can interface with. You can get to our documentation there. We want everything you can do on the website to be available through the API. So now I'm just going to show a couple of screenshots of some of the new tools, the plans that we have, and then I'll wrap up for questions. So a couple of the changes we have coming in terms of writing a plan. One big one is we're going to have a project level that can contain multiple plans. We have a lot of people that maybe they have to write a DMP for their funder, and then they go do work at a field station who requires their own DMP. We want to make sure we can connect all of that together. We're going to allow people, as I mentioned earlier, to select a template other than their funder when they're writing a plan, because there are some edge cases where that happens, upload a DMP created elsewhere, and a lot more details that hopefully make this, meet the more greater complexity that we're seeing in research these days. We want to generally make the website easier to use, solving some common issues that people have, like having multiple email addresses. Right now, if somebody invites you to collaborate on a plan, but they use the email address that you don't use on the DMP tool, it can cause a lot of challenges. And so we just wanted to overall make this site more friendly for people. We also want to make it easier to write new templates, which I know is a big theme of this session. So for example, right now, if you want to write a new template, you have to just start from scratch. And we want to make it easier to copy an existing template from the start to make it a lot easier to get a new template in place and kind of keep things more consistent and follow best practices. And we want to be able to give you advice when you're writing templates as well in the tool. We also want to add a lot more structured question types to get at that machine actionability. So the main, most questions on a templates right now are text boxes, and we certainly want to keep that as an option. But we want to add more things available, like an ORCID lookup, so that you could potentially have for a question like, who's going to manage the data, put in a structured question rather than just writing that in text. And a lot of other new options, like new themes for software, which is something we're seeing quite a lot, and we don't have a theme for in the current tool. So here's just a quick screenshot. This is actual developed work. The previous ones were mock-ups, but this is now our in development tool. Some of the first people to see this, where you can, just a couple of the screens that have been developed about selecting an existing template to copy from, and then what the edit template page will look like if you're administrator writing a template. So this rebuild is hopefully coming this year. The goal is to launch it by the end of the calendar year, probably on the later side. It's not going to have everything we want in the very first version. We're going to keep maintaining this, keep adding more over time. To be very clear, it's still going to be free to use. We're not planning to start charging for the service, and we're going to try to migrate everything that we can, hopefully to the point where you don't even notice that there's a new tool, except for how great it is. We don't want to make people have to rewrite everything. We're working on some other cool features that I don't have time to talk about uploading DMPs or matching to related works out in the wild. But we have some things that we're in testing right now that we hope will come out soon after the rebuild. So that's what I have for the DMP tool. You have my email there if you want to reach out about any general questions or feedback. If you have tool-specific issues, like something's not working, you want to report an issue, I also have our help desk email. It also goes to me, but it's a lot easier to track if those things are separated.
Awesome. Thanks, Becky. Those are great updates. So we do have some time for questions. I'm happy to open it up if anybody wants to raise your hand or put a question in the chat. You can also use the notes document. All of those are open right now. I'll start off, however, Becky, I was very interested in some of the updates. And so going back into a data management plan in an ideal world, right, you would be able to add links as products are actually being generated. Can you talk a little bit about what that's going to look like?
Absolutely. That's actually something you already can do, though not many people are. And so we have an output. We have a tab in the current tool called the research outputs. It's a little more complicated than I can get into in this time because the templates have to allow that research outputs tab. But there is a tab that people can add on to a template that allows them to say, hey, these are my planned outputs. And so you can say things like, I'm going to publish this particular data set in this repository. And then you can go back and have actual links to those when you have them. And that will be on the landing page. So we do see some people using them, particularly for some of those public plans. If they've registered, some people will go back and add links, but it's not particularly common. Most people will write their DMP to submit and come back. And so one of the goals of our related works matching is to try to make this process easier and more helpful to researchers so that they have a motivation to come back and update those links. So the related work that I didn't have time to talk about is we are actively testing, trying to automatically find links to related data sets, software, and papers that have been published from a DMP and suggest to the researchers, hey, we found these 5 potential, related matches. Can you confirm that these are correct? Mm-hmm. And if so, we'll add them to the record of the DMP landing page. So hopefully that makes it easier. That's really valuable for them so that their DMP, already has all these links and we can see all the cool stuff that was published from it and makes it a lot easier. So they just have to confirm or deny rather than enter all that information. Other updates like that, we hope will make it so that people are more likely to come back to the DMP at all and add in things like that will make their data more fair overall.
I have another question, but I'll pause to see if anyone else would like to ask one. Yes, please go ahead.
So this is just a general question for everybody. We've noticed at the Arctic Data Center that there's definitely a desire to meet funder requirements for DMPs, but a lot of projects aren't necessarily using them in our community as this core way that they're organizing their projects and actually doing their research. Does anybody know of groups that are using DMPs as one of their primary, project management tools, and that they're keeping them up to date and really actively pursuing them, or are they pretty much still a funder mandate sort of thing across the board? I'm just curious if there are other experiences like that.
Becky, go ahead.
Yeah. I I'm still fairly new to this area, by the way. I've been here about 6 months, and from what I've seen so far, it's still mostly the funder mandate. But I think that the areas of integration, I'm very hopeful about making the DMP more of that kind of project management you're talking about. For me personally, I don't want it to become more of a burden. We want DMPs to be easy. I don't want to try to force it to be a project management tool if it's not. But because so much of that information that's going to be relevant to the project is already there, I think as we get the more access through the API, we can do things like integrate with a university system that might be that actual project management. And there's just a lot less information of people have to repeat. So for example, if people have electronic lab notebooks at their university and that's what they want to use to manage all their data, can they connect with the DMP tool to get the information for the project automatically into the DMP and then automatically update over time if it updates in the project management website that they're using? And so I think the goal for me is not necessarily that DMP becomes the hub, but that everything comes from a hub. And so that information across that research project is automatically updated and people don't have to worry about updating it in 4 different places, wherever it is that they decide is the source of truth.
I'll give a to that. That would be amazing. Madison, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I will say within USGS definitely is happening when it's happening at the beginning, and people really aren't going back to it and using it very much. I will say some of the folks who are more on the policy side in USGS, when they get questions from researchers, or like perhaps a researcher is being asked to release their data at the end of their project, and they're saying, oh wait, no, we're not allowed to release these data, we're not allowed to share these data. And so the folks kind of on the policy side are saying, show me in your data management plan where you've documented that. And so there is kind of some of this, the policy folks driving them to go back and look at it and kind of use it later on. But that's definitely not happening from kind of the researcher side.
Yeah, so an interesting nuance to think about as we go into the breakout sessions, right, is how do we encourage a lot of the information people generate throughout the project to end up back in linked to the DMP. And I liked Becky's comment around and John, if you wanted to speak up around data management plan isn't necessarily like the tool, but it should help inform how the project is going to be managed and the outcomes from it. And I was curious too, something else to think about from the funder side of things, is there going to start to be an expectation where the funders are going to want to start to track, especially with the machine actionable, right? It's a very simple way for them to say like, oh, what actually was generated from the proposal that we funded in a single location. And that would be an interesting component to think through too. Does anybody have one more comment? And then we'll switch over to the breakout session. Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, yesterday, Casey, the plenary speaker, said something that I thought was quite sort of salient, which was that, data management and sort of best practices are dependent on practice and discipline. And I'm curious if anybody has identified ways for people to practice creating and using DMPs in like low stakes situations. So not where you're saying, hey, I really need this money to keep my lab open, but rather it's another skill like hazmat training or something like that we go through. I realize that's like nobody wants to spend their time doing that, but has anybody investigated that at all?
The closest thing I can think of is I know of a few universities that teach courses on data management plans. Trying to teach that is just like a research skill like any other. That is like, hey, here's the thing, and it's literally like a whole semester course on it, and so they'll go into how it can be useful for you and what are all the things that you need to do. I've not taken one, so I don't know exactly what's covered, but that seems to get at the kind of thing you're talking about.
Stephen, I think you know what post-its to add to the board when you go to the breakouts.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, Steve, do you have a quick comment?
Yeah, really quickly. Stacey Bellew and I both teach DMPs as Becky sort of described it at the university level. She has a whole series. I have an individual class that I insert into each class each quarter at Scripps. So it is being taught in a formal way, and I know that Steve and I have been working on normalizing that.
So it'd be interesting to get some shared resources that we could provide out to this group too, to maybe start to ask for integration into your organizations or universities. Okay, Madison, last comment, please.
Yeah, so not necessarily within USGS, but one of our partner organizations, or sister, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they have an annual data management kind of workshop, and each year they have a DMP session where folks can come and like bring a project and like work on writing their DMP and kind of getting help and things like that. I haven't actually attended it, but Steve's question made me think about that, and that might be a potential way to get people practice, especially if they have to write it anyway, and it's just a good place to come and have support in doing that.
Probably ideally it should be part of every, first year graduate student training as we do this. Okay, so just to keep mind of times, we have some time for people to co-work. We do have a Miro board set up, and the link is in the notes document under the agenda section. And I think Megan has probably made all of our breakout groups, but I wanted to walk people through Miro board if you've not used it before real quick. So there's several Miro boards here. So Carolina's going to take breakout group 1, for example. There's some instructions here. Based on the presentation and your experience with DMPs, as appropriate, please add ideas for the 3 main sections. So these are various sections that were consistent across a variety of data management plans that I pulled for the various agencies. What is being produced? How is it being standardized? And how will be accessed, shared, and preserved? So I want to focus on these 3 sections. And there's stickies. You just click on one, grab it, and pull it off. And then you can write in it, and they should just be infinite. So feel free to grab as many stickies as you want. The stickies have 2 labels. They're sort of best practices and then limitations. So again, sections that aren't necessarily either training that's not available or it's not capturing the kind of data products that you have. I also want to let people know, if you're not familiar with it, there is a toggle here. So if you click on this little arrow up here where everybody is, there is a toggle for show cursors. If people get overstimulated by 1,000 cursors running around, that's how you can turn them off. There's also a couple of sections over here in gray that I didn't want to spend time on necessarily, but these were consistent across all of them. There's some discussion around what policies are. So these are, licenses or access policies. And then there's also roles and responsibilities. So I don't necessarily want to spend time in the breakout focused on those 2 topics, but as they come up, please feel free to add sticky notes to it. So the plan is we're going to spend 5 minutes per each one of these sections. I'm going to start a timer in the Miro board. So you're going to go to your breakout rooms. I'm going to start a 5-minute timer. As a group, please feel free, either you can just talk through it or people can work independently on sort of what's being produced, 5 minutes on how it's being standardized, and then how it'll be accessed and preserved. And then we'll come back and have a little bit of a report out or sort of takeaway that you have from any of those sessions. Does anybody have any questions? Does that sound good to everyone?
So 5 minutes in the breakout room, and then we'll come back, as you said. And if there's anyone who doesn't want to go into a breakout room, you can stay here in the main room and there'll be activity here. If any of the breakouts get too small, I know sometimes folks move around. You can always come back to the main room and I can help you get elsewhere.
And Megan, do it for 15 minutes total, and I'll just have the timer go off so people stay in there but kind of know to move between the rooms if you can.
Okay.
Can you change it?
Gotcha. All right, the room should be open. You should be invited to join a room, except for co-hosts who have to manually move themselves. There are a lot of you. A few of the co-hosts may want to stay in the main room since I didn't actually assign anyone to the main room. I figured there'd be enough people with trouble moving that the main room would automatically populate.
Becky and I are going to hang out. So if anybody has questions for us, we'll be hanging out in the main room.
When you started that, I got a pop-up that about the breakout rooms as a co-host, and with a big red button that I almost clicked, and it said close all rooms.
Yes. Try not to click that if you can help it, but it's okay. We can pivot if need be. If anyone else needs help moving, let's speak up, or otherwise you're here in the main room.
Hi, Megan.
Yes.
It didn't pop up the breakout room for me.
Okay, that's all right. I will move you right now. Thank you.
It says, please wait to be assigned.
Yes, Jessica, I will move you. Awesome. All right. And I think a few of you should stay here, so I'm not going to assign all of you.
Okay, yeah, great. So for those that are still here, we're going to be hanging out on the last panel. It says main room, where Becky and I are hanging out in case anybody needs to come back to the CDL. Does everybody see the main room? It's the last panel on the right. You can also click on my icon and follow me if you need. So for this group, I think, you know, we can have just a general discussion, but please feel free to put some stickies in around kind of in your experience with data management plans, what's been working, what hasn't been working. And oh, Stephen is still here too. He needs Stephen to go to a different room.
Yes, he needs to be in the Steve room. I moved him.
Great.
Or invited him to move. Yep. Okay.
Perfect. Well, I think that most of us are kind of on the agency side of things. I don't know James and Rudy very well. James and Rudy, are you able to find the main room? You're aboard.
They may have stepped away for a minute.
Yeah, they were both invited to join other rooms, but did not join them. So I
okay.
Suspect.
Yeah, and I'm fine just hanging out if people need to pop back and forth with questions.
And if you want to pop in and out of the breakout sessions too, you know, that's fine too. I'm happy to stay here if this room is mostly busy otherwise.
Yeah.
Looks like a couple of the rooms only have a few people in them at the moment.
Get it opened up.
Joseph's room is small, as is Madison's. But good people everywhere.
Oh yeah, Matt's in there with Madison. That's good. Steve's got a bunch of people. Glad he's over there. Cool. Well, yeah, I'm curious to see how.
So I'm curious to learn more. I heard a little bit from Steve, you know, and I got a couple ideas, but like, what is the kind of the plan for making this into a template? Is the idea like this is an ESIP template that's added on? Is it getting funders to adopt this? Is it guidance that you would add to templates? I'm kind of curious to know what some of the options are.
Yeah, so within ESIP, there are several agencies or funders or a variety, a combination of the that have various data management plans in various stages of maturity. And so Joseph originally was hoping to have a workshop where we actually were supporting the agencies to build out particular templates, but a lot of the conversation turned into just, what are we talking about? Some people's data is very specific, some people's data doesn't fit in some templates. And so just understanding more around each of the sections, how do you draft a section prompt so that you can support your community to understand what you want in that section. And so we kind of decided that this would be a place to start to get feedback from the ESIP community about what's working, what's not working, if there's limitations to the current section, So in here, there's some, I just sort of gleaned some various guidance from some of the organizations that are part of ESIP, including the Arctic Data Center and USGS and BCO-DEMO. And some of them have various levels of can I send a message to everybody? How's that work,
Yes,
Megan?
you can broadcast if you open the breakout tab.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Right next to the big red close all rooms
The
button.
scary one.
This is the one that you're not supposed to touch. All right. So the thought is that I'm going to work with the co-chairs and our various different organizations to take some of this feedback. And then ideally, I'd like to start to set up kind of A/B interviews where you have kind of a couple of different prompts for people, and we'll do some user research across the ESIP membership to say, okay, if you got given a data management template with these 2 prompts in there, how does it, like, is there different information that you think you would put in? Like what is the part of the prompt that's more informative? If you read one, would you put something in different than if you read the other? So kind of trying to get some just general user feedback around how these different template prompts might induce different types of information to go in there. And
Okay.
then the summer meeting, so if you're interested and available, there will be an ESIP meeting in person in Seattle in July. And the idea would be to present some of that user research back and then start to see if there is interest from the agencies to update or modify some additional templates that way.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. Thank you. So yeah, the idea might be kind of like updating some of these ones that people are using to be more helpful and relevant. Okay. One thing that just to be aware of, that we've done before I was here, but there have been funders who have looked at kind of A/B testing versions of templates within the tool itself. So there's a lot of extra work than interviewing people, but just know that it's something that could potentially be worked on in the future, where there was, a funder that put in an A and a B version of the template in the tool, and for like a year or two, again, I don't actually know all the details, assign researchers to do one of the other templates to then get feedback on which one to like over the course of real DMPs for grants. So again, you have to get the funders on board. You have to think about how you're assigning people and how you get them to pick the right one. But that is something that is possible to do.
And do you have any data from that, or is that able to be shared? Just kind of what the feedback was, or what their okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was with NIH. I don't think it was like, again, it was just I wasn't here for it, and so I think they got feedback. I don't know how they collected the feedback or how they used it. I just know we had Alpha and Bravo in the tool, and people had to pick one or the other. And I was told it was for testing.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, if you have a contact for who maybe was responsible for putting those templates in, I'd love to reach out to them and just be like, hey, we heard that you had a couple of templates out there. I'd be curious to see if there was much difference in terms of the usage of them.
Yeah, I'll see what I can find out. Don't count on it, but I'll see if I can figure that out. I don't know.
Understood.
I'm not even sure where to ask, but I'll try to ask Maria, my predecessor, if she knows where to go for that.
Okay.
However they did do it, that doesn't mean you would do it the same way, but that is certainly an option. We can put in as many templates as we want into the tool. We just, it's up to the user to select them. We don't have a way to randomly assign templates, but if there was something where you wanted people to, we also have a staging site. And so we can always set up test templates if you ever wanted to send people to actually fill it out without it being a real one.
This would probably just be a mock, like, here's a Google Doc, here's a prompt. Like, what is it?
Right.
What is it? Yeah.
It would be
very
typically
basic.
wanted to do like a big thing with, if you need to get the funder on board, who wants it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so part of this would just be, for us to provide guidance and make sure that the funders are aware of some of the user research, and they, of course, would make their own decisions, right? It's just recommendations. We can't really prescribe anything. So I had another, for the APIs side, and leveraging kind of like your link discovery component. Are you triggering on like data site record DOIs or like ISGN do you persistent identifier? Like what are you looking for when you're trying
Yeah.
to do the actual scraping?
So right now we're looking at, if I remember correctly, data site, Open Alex, and Crossref. And we're trying to match on where whatever information that we have. And there's a weighted score for, we look at the DMP, we have, for example, the grant ID. And that is the most, if they cite that grant ID in their paper, the data set, that's the best thing. So that gets a very high score. Then there's kind of a lower weighted score for do the authors match, do the topics match, do the do things like that. And so we're kind of actively testing that night. We're getting, right now we're still missing a lot of, getting a lot of false negatives, a lot of false positives. So we asked our pilot partners to review hundreds of our initial matches and then confirm or reject it. And now we're iterating on that. The biggest issue is data normalization, as it often is, to like actually get those things matched. And we're still mostly getting papers right now, not data sets. We need the metadata to be really complete for both the DMP and the data set to get, and we just have a lot less of that. But that's how we're matching right now, and we'll keep, we want to keep adding more data sources and keep having that be better. I also want to add, oh, sorry. I have a different question that came up in chat I'd like to answer unless you had a follow-up. So I got sent a question in chat about several DMPs get created for proposals that never get funded. Is there any intent to link successful funded projects to their DMPs and DMP tools, say perhaps via RAID, PIDs, or similar? How are they currently tied to successful projects, if not through the PI? It's a great question, definitely something we want to do. Right now, it is dependent on the PI or somebody from the DAP going back to updating that project, and people are generally not always doing that. We do hook up to funder APIs right now to search for, or as part of our pilot, we're connecting with funder APIs. And so we're exploring how we could potentially automatically update that, but there's still a lot of tricky business there of knowing for sure that this is the right grant that we're matching. We really need the researcher to enter that like opportunity number correctly. And we see a lot of people not doing that. So we're a little cautious about, we tried at one point automatically updating projects as funded or not, and there were a lot of errors there. And so we don't do that anymore. We are looking at RAID PIDs when we move to that project level for a plan instead of just a plan. We don't know, how. The idea is like, yes, that would make sense to connect to RAID, but we haven't figured out what that connection would look like or how to do that. The simplest option for the start is probably just, if you have a RAID project ID, enter it here. And then we figure out over time how to connect that better and really keep those project details consistent. So absolutely something we want to look at. Won't be in the first iteration in the tool just for the sake of time, but I want to keep exploring how we can connect those better.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jenny. I do think it's interesting. A lot of the conversation throughout the presentations and even this discussion has been around awareness and training. Like that seems to be the biggest hurdles still, is just getting people to know about the resources and get enough training to be able to use them effectively. So that's interesting, actually. Great.
Yeah, and for me, when it comes to things like researchers coming back to update, we wanted people in the publishing system or data librarians or something. It's not going to happen unless it's good for the researchers too. And I don't mean that as a slight to them. I was a researcher. It's like people have a lot going on. We need there to be a reason people come back and do that. We need to be adding value in the DMP that makes it worth doing, not just kind of trying to mandate more to get it to happen. Mandates are important too, but just trying to figure out how can we make this beneficial and, just something that people actually helps them to do.
Yeah. Okay, sounds like they're going to close the rooms in 20 seconds. So great. Yeah, we've been discussing a lot around awareness, training, and adoption, and like what do you need to go through supporting culture change through those three major things. And so it would be interesting to think through.
Yeah, the other big thing that we kind of hear and we see, I see the comment about like the DMPs that come through. it's unclear to a lot of people what they really have to write for DMP or how important it is. You know, we had somebody that looked into the quality. I'm scared to share this as people are coming in, but we had somebody that looked at the quality of DMPs compared to the grant approval process, and they were inversely related because a lot of people that know they're going to get funded aren't spending a lot of time on their DMPs, and so
Oh, that is interesting. Wow.
yeah, I think that's changing. This was, you know, but it's something where people aren't going to be motivated to spend a lot of time getting this perfectly crafted if it's not actually even being related to if they're getting approved or not.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, there's a few rooms that are coming back still. Great. Okay, so we got everybody back. All right, so in the essence of time, I want to leave a few minutes at the end for some follow-on conversation that's come up a little bit related to sort of data and proposals and funders, specifically for the National Science Foundation, and a little bit around sort of next steps for what this group is. So I will put an open call out to the various Miro board groups if any of the leads want to kind of unmute and kind of give us a summary of how that went. Any sort of major takeaways that came from your groups? We'll start. Carolina, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we had a good discussion on each of the sections. I think one thing that came up at the end that was kind of interesting was the trade-off between like fair and open data and like the need to have education and knowledge on the difference between those and what that means in the blue section on policy related. I don't know if anybody from the breakout wants to chat on that, but also that sometimes for metadata and data standards that there's also a trade-off between like the software used and what is kind of like useful in practice based and what the idealized like standards are and expectations are to have like broader interoperability like outside of your actual immediate community of practice. So that was another kind of trade-off. I'm moving backwards, sorry. And then the pink section that yeah, just how to deal with integrating, yeah, all those issues throughout the data lifecycle from planning to acquisition and publication. So yeah, that was kind of my takeaways, but there was some great discussion in the room if anyone wants to add.
I'll just add to that I think sort of an underlying theme of our discussion was, you know, challenging yourself or sort of checking yourself to, do you really understand the implications of what you're writing? You know, there's an awful lot of temptation to just paste in boilerplate information, but when you say that you're going to share your data here or you're going to be fair or whatever, do you really understand what that means, and will you be able to back it up if asked to? So.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll go through Joseph and Bolivar, and then the other groups. If you have anything you want to chime in on, feel free to, but I'm not going to put any of the other speakers on the call to report out. So Joseph, go ahead.
I'm just going to skip in the interest of time.
Okay. Bolivar, anything you want to say?
Hi. Yeah, I'm kind of reading a little bit through this, but what we had just a little bit of a conversation. This was brought by Jessica from NOAA, just about the restrictions that exist in the blue section. You know, how restrictions and having more information about restrictions can really help knowing the accessibility of that data, and but providing enough information to make it discoverable, and to know what types of restrictions it has, So then you can kind of operate and either you're part of that community of practice that can access it or not, or is it foiable, etc. So that was a little bit of that. There's some more other information that I have not synthesized, but yeah.
Fair enough. Any other topics that anyone has a burning desire to report out on? Otherwise, myself and my co-chairs will come back, obviously, and we'll do some synthesis from all of your lovely posted notes. So thank you. Madison, please.
Yeah, I think one of the themes of what we talked about was kind of really getting at the purpose of the DMP and expectations of the DMP. So if it's just for use as a planning tool, like how is, the information that you'll be able to glean from that is very limited, right? Because a lot of people don't know things at the beginning, and they kind of figure it out throughout the course of the project, as they should. They're research projects, right? You don't know like if you knew everything at the beginning, you wouldn't be really doing research. But that like data centers and others really desire kind of more, right? More detail, which would need to be gathered over time. And so having those active DMPs is really critical for them to be able to drive like the archival process kind of towards the end. And so that's just one of the tensions, I think, with DMPs and the perspective that you come to a DMP with, like the author and research perspective, maybe just thinking, this is just my plan, and then you forget about it, versus like something that the data centers want and need to get more out of those plans. If Matt, if the two Matts have anything to add to that, please feel free to chime in.
Okay, I think that's an interesting one. And just to lead into a little bit of wrap up, thanks everyone for your time and your brain power that went into the Miro board. I'm excited to go through some of that. A thing that came up in the main session, Becky and I were talking a little bit about a lot of it seems to be around awareness and training, and then also understanding that there is an opportunity to come back and update these things, right? It's not just a box checking exercise. It could actually serve some more incentive. And so how do you go through awareness and a training and then incentivize adoption? And so I think that's something that we can think through as a group, especially on sort of people in ESIP as we move forward. So the goal is to spend the next several months in preparation for the summer meeting, working with ESIP members to sort of understand their relationships with data management plans across these three main sections, what's working, what's not working, maybe set up some A/B testing around, what is getting to the flexibility versus very structured, getting to the research perspective on this is a box checking exercise when I start the experiment, versus the data center actually wanting a bit more granularity as an archival and record purpose moving forward. So that'll be sort of the plan. So hopefully we'll see many of you in Seattle in person in July, and we can revisit this conversation with some more data that goes into that. So that's kind of the goal in the wrap up. The Data Stewardship Committee meets on Mondays once a month, and the Marine Data Cluster, Carolina Joseph, meets on
the second Thursday at 11 Pacific and 2 Eastern.
And all of these links for those meetings are in the very nicely curated ESIP community calendar. So, yep. Thanks, Megan.
Yes.
Okay, so before we sign off, I did want to open it up to Shelley. I think Danny had to drop off. And then Raleigh hopefully is still on. Excellent. So there is some ongoing conversation around draft language for the NSF proposal and award policies and procedures guide, which is a very long acronym. And they're looking for feedback. And so Shelley, I guess I'll hand it over to you.
I'm going to very quickly give it to Raleigh, but my job here is to bring this to your attention and have you reach out to your communities, just, for anybody who's funded through NSF, and to let you know that you must use the Federal Registry submission tool. Do not just email your program officer with your comments. That's not going to get responded to in the way we would like. And I think once you take a look at this, the text around the data management and sharing plan, new text, just make sure it's in alignment with the kinds of things we've been talking about today and what your communities are looking for, and do be prolific in your comments. So Raleigh, I think I said things you can't say, so you go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just provide factual information, which is that
NSF, all proposals are subject to our PAPG Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, which typically gets revised every year. This year, in response to the OSTB Nelson memo, which as far as I know is still in effect, the NSF PAPG revision includes updated language on data management sharing plans, DMSPs. The big change is that instead of what is currently a flat 2-page kind of free-form file, the PAPG is proposing that there now be basically a fillable web form tool in our research.gov proposal preparation system. And though the PAPG doesn't get into the nitty-gritty of what that tool will look like, it does identify kind of the categories of information that will be requested. And so at the very least, the idea is instead of just a flat kind of open-ended 2-page file, there's now more specific data collection around, key attributes of what is expected for data management and sharing. That's the intent. But of course, the public comment is open for those who have thoughts or concerns, positive or negative, regarding that planned change.
All right, so everyone who has received or is planning to get NSF funding, this would be a good time to go in and have a look at that. I think this conversation hopefully primed you to really think through the importance of those particular sections and what that needs to look like. So thank you. I think Shelley put in a big section in there with a bunch of links and guidance for it. It is on page 70 of the PDF, so maybe the first 69 pages you can kind of lightly skim through. Please don't burn out before you get to page 70, I think is the goal there. And feedback is due on the 10th of February. So we've got a couple weeks, but it sounds important.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Matt had temporarily raised his hand, but took it back down.
I was just going to ask a question about the stuff with the rally, but I'll follow up later. Thanks.
Okay. Great. Any other questions for Boulevard, Carolina, Joseph, or myself? Sorry, Shelley.
Just doubling down that some of us are used to sending comments to a particular email at NSF, and the guidance is don't do that. I mean, you can certainly copy your friends, for awareness, but for an actual official response that that the NSF has to account for, make sure it's through the Federal Registry link at the top of that page.
Yeah.
And Alicia, I just want to make a quick plug before everyone drops off. We have another great set of breakout sessions at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, and then at 4 p.m. Eastern is the live research showcase poster and demo event. We have a fairly intimate set of posters. I think we have 13 or 14, but they are phenomenal, and I hope that everyone will make an effort to come and interact live with the presenters. So please mark your calendars if you can.
All right. We will wrap up on time. So thank you to all of the speakers, and thank you to everyone who contributed post-its on the mural. I'm very much looking forward to that. Boulevard and I have some homework to do, and we look forward to seeing you in other sessions this week.